There is a power that has been assigned to you. I want you to sit with that word for a moment. Assigned. Not wished for you, not hoped for you. Assigned, designated, set apart, with your name on it, before you were old enough to understand what a name even meant. But here is what most chosen ones never get told, and what I believe you need to hear today, in this exact moment of your life. This power is not gentle. It doesn't sit quietly on a shelf waiting to be picked up. It reorganizes, it shifts atmospheres, it carries a weight that most people, unprepared people, would not survive receiving. And God, who designed you for this, who numbered your days before you drew your first breath, looked at the power and looked at you and said, "Not yet." Not because he doubted you, not because he forgot, because he understood something your pain could not yet teach you, that this power, given too soon, would have destroyed the very thing it was meant to build. So he did something that looked, from the inside, like silence, like delay, like a door that should have opened by now, and hasn't. He called it training. You've been calling it waiting. There is a difference. And that difference will reshape everything you thought you understood about the last season of your life. If you've been carrying that ache, that gap between what you know you were built for and what your life currently looks like, this message is for you. The training is almost done. The power is almost here. And before it arrives, you need to understand exactly how dangerous it is and exactly why God needed this much time to prepare you to hold it. Stay with me through this entire message, because by the time we reach the end, you are going to understand 3 things that I believe will change the way you see yourself permanently. You're going to understand what this power actually is and why it's dangerous in a way you probably haven't heard explained before. You're going to recognize the exact signs that tell you your season of training is completing right now. And you're going to receive something at the end of this, a prayer, a commission that I believe will mark a turning point for you. Don't leave early. What's at the end matters just as much as what's at the beginning. Now, let's talk about the delay. Most people who are waiting for their breakthrough believe one of 3 things. Either God is testing them, or they've done something wrong, or somehow, in the vast movement of everything, they simply got overlooked. But there is a third option, an option almost no one considers. What if the reason you haven't received it yet has nothing to do with your worthiness and everything to do with the weight of what's coming? What if the power assigned to you is so significant, so precise, so potentially world-altering that the preparation it required was not optional? What if God didn't delay the gift because he was unsure of you, but because he was protecting you from yourself? Think about that for a moment. Not from others, from yourself. A sword doesn't apologize for being sharpened before it's used. A foundation doesn't resent being buried underground. And a chosen one, a real one, doesn't receive their power before they can carry it. Here is the first thing I need you to understand. The delay in your life is not a reflection of your deficiency. It is a reflection of the scale of what you've been assigned to carry. Because there is a law, an ancient one, consistent across every tradition that has ever taken the interior life seriously, and it is this: the more dangerous the power, the longer the preparation required. Not dangerous like destructive, dangerous like transformative, dangerous because it doesn't just change you, it changes every room you walk into, every life you touch, every generation that comes after you. Dangerous because it carries responsibility most people are not ready for. Dangerous because, in the wrong hands, even your hands, before the right season, it would do more harm than good. This is why God has been quiet. This is why the door hasn't opened. This is why you've been in this season longer than you thought you could bear. You are not being denied. You are being prepared for something that requires the most careful preparation in existence. Now here is where it gets specific. Because I don't want to give you a beautiful idea and leave you with nothing to hold on to. I want to tell you what this power actually does and why God couldn't hand it to you before this. The power that's been assigned to you is not a shield. It is not a security system that protects you from hard things. It amplifies. Whatever is inside the person holding it, it amplifies that. If trauma hasn't been processed, the power amplifies pain. If ego hasn't been submitted, the power amplifies pride. If fear hasn't been confronted, the power amplifies paralysis, and the reverse is equally true. When the person carrying it has been through the fire, has had false things stripped away, has learned to hold suffering without collapsing, the power amplifies all of that too. It amplifies clarity, discernment, presence, the ability to walk into a broken situation and carry something that stabilizes it. This is why God couldn't hand it to you 3 years ago. Not because 3 years ago you were bad, but because 3 years ago you were still operating from identities and wounds that would have caused this power to work against you instead of through you. The training wasn't punishment, the training was protection. For you, and for everyone you were designed to impact. God didn't withhold this from you to be cruel. He withheld it to protect the world you're about to step into and to protect you from the version of yourself that would have misused it. Now, I want to take you deeper, because what I'm about to show you is the part of this that most people never get to see. When you understand what your suffering was actually building, not just spiritually, but inside you, in the most practical and precise sense, I believe it will do something that very few things have been able to do. It will make your pain make sense. There have been specific stages in the training you've been going through, and I want to name them because many of you have been through several of these and never understood that each one was building something irreplaceable. The first stage is what I'll call the betrayal curriculum. When someone you trusted, a person, an institution, a community turned on you, or left you, or revealed themselves to be something other than what you believed. That experience, as devastating as it was, did something inside you that years of reading and praying and trying could never have done. It built discernment, a deep cellular level ability to read people past the surface, to sense misalignment before it becomes visible, to love without being naive. Joseph knew this. His brothers sold him. And it was precisely that experience, not in spite of it, but through it, that made him the kind of man who could stand in a room full of powerful people and read what was underneath everything they were saying. The second stage is the isolation curriculum. And this one is perhaps the most painful, because it's so quiet. The seasons where you pulled back, or were pushed back, from community, where you weren't in a group, weren't surrounded by voices, weren't receiving the constant affirmation that tells most people who they are. In those seasons, you were being stripped of something that was never supposed to be your foundation. The need for external validation, the ability to only know yourself when someone else is confirming you. David understood this. Those years as a shepherd, before anyone knew his name, before he was anointed in front of his family, those years in the field, with just God and the silence and the stars. He wasn't being ignored in those years. He was being given something that no throne room could have built, an identity that came from the inside. The third stage is the repeated failure curriculum, the seasons where you tried and it didn't work, where you built something and it collapsed, where you took a step of faith and the ground didn't hold. This one is particularly hard because it attacks your confidence in your own discernment. And yet this is the stage that builds what I can only call resilience architecture, the internal structure that allows you to begin again without losing the vision. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness after his first attempt at leadership failed spectacularly. 40 years. And when he came back out, he was not a broken man. He was a man who had no illusions left about himself, and that is precisely what made him capable of the assignment. The fourth stage is the spiritual dryness curriculum, the seasons where you couldn't feel God's presence, where prayer felt like sending letters into silence, where the things that used to move you spiritually just didn't anymore. This stage is building something that is extraordinarily rare. Faith that doesn't depend on feeling. action that doesn't require emotional confirmation, the willingness to keep moving when nothing inside you is lighting up. This is one of the most advanced things a human being can develop, and it cannot be built in comfortable seasons. And the fifth stage, this one I want you to really hear, is the comparison curriculum, the season where you watched other people receive what you were believing for, where people with less time invested, less sacrifice made, less suffering survived, somehow walked into the thing you'd been waiting for, and you had to keep going anyway. That stage, painful as it is, was building something that almost no one talks about: identity independence. The ability to know your own timeline is yours, not a lesser version of someone else's, not a delay compared to someone else's arrival. Your path is not a slower version of another path. It is a different path entirely. Now here is why I'm telling you all of this, and why it matters specifically for where you are right now. Science has actually caught up to something ancient wisdom already knew. Research into the human brain under prolonged adversity, not acute crisis, but extended seasons of difficulty, has found something remarkable. The brain in those conditions is forced to develop neural pathways that simply don't form under comfortable circumstances. Pattern recognition becomes sharper. The ability to perceive what others miss becomes more refined. And, at the center of all of it, is something neuroscientists have identified as one of the most significant brainwave frequencies in human consciousness. They call it the gamma frequency. What's fascinating about gamma is that it's been present in all of us since childhood, when you were young, before the school system, before the pressure, before the responsibilities of adult life started compressing your nervous system into a narrower and narrower band of function. Gamma was active in you constantly. It's the frequency of heightened intuition, of sudden clarity, of those moments where you just know something before you can explain how. Scientists call the shutting down of this frequency as we age the decline effect, and they've been researching for decades whether it can be restored. Dr. Robert Lake, a neuroscientist with 34 years of experience, whose work has been referenced by research teams at MIT, Harvard, Stanford, and Princeton, discovered something that I find almost impossible to talk about without getting emotional. He found that the gamma frequency, the one you were born with, the one that was slowly suppressed by the weight of modern life, can be reactivated. Not through years of meditation, not through expensive equipment, not through anything complicated, through sound. Specifically designed audio frequencies that use a technology called brain entrainment, where your brain begins to synchronize with what it's hearing, shifting into gamma naturally, the way it was designed to operate before the decline effect set in. He condensed that entire body of research into a 7-minute audio track called The Genius Song. 7 minutes. Headphones on, eyes closed, nothing else required. Now I want to be honest with you, because I think you deserve that. This is not a magic solution. This is a tool, a remarkably precise, scientifically developed tool, but a tool. It supports what God is already doing in you. It's the kind of thing that makes sense to me specifically in this season, because what it does is restore something that was always yours. It doesn't give you something foreign. It gives back what was dimmed. The standard price for the Genius Song is $49, which, when you consider that traditional biofeedback therapy to achieve similar gamma activation costs $300 per session, and the home equipment to do it yourself runs close to $7,000, is extraordinarily accessible. But Dr. Lake wanted this technology to reach the people who actually need it most, not just people with means. People in the middle of their wilderness season, people carrying the exact kind of preparation we've been talking about in this message. So for people who encounter this specific video, he's made it available for $39. You won't find that price on Amazon. You won't find it anywhere else. It doesn't exist outside of this conversation. For $39, you receive the 7-minute track plus 4 additional resources, an audio track specifically designed for children called Genius Child. The original book that inspired The Secret, the deeper, more practical version, valued at $20 on its own, a guided visualization across 4 areas of life, and an infographic outlining the 5 most important daily habits for building a life aligned with your purpose. Everything comes with a 100% money-back guarantee, with no limit on use before you ask for your refund. You take no risk. I need to say one more thing about this, and I want you to take it seriously. There are counterfeit versions of this technology circulating. Audio files using the name, but without the actual brain entrainment frequencies, embedded just regular sound that produces none of the results. The only way to ensure you receive the genuine technology, the full set of bonuses, and the money-back guarantee is through the link I've placed in the description and the pinned comment of this video. Please don't search for it elsewhere. What you'll find there is not the same thing. If you want to explore this, the link is there for you. Now let me tell you about the 3 signs that tell you your training is reaching its completion, because this is what I want you to leave this first part of the message carrying. The first sign is a kind of unusual clarity that begins to emerge around what you no longer want. And I want to be specific about what I mean, because it might sound strange at first. You may not know yet with precision what you're moving toward, but something in you has become very clear about what you are moving away from. Relationships that drain you without restoring you. Environments that shrink you. Versions of yourself you used to perform because someone needed you to. That clarity, even if it feels like loss in the moment, is not confusion. It is precision beginning to emerge. When false identities have been stripped away, what remains is real. And real things know what they're not for. The second sign is that things are ending and opening simultaneously, and the pace of it feels faster than you can process. Old chapters closing, sometimes abruptly, sometimes quietly, sometimes through circumstances that didn't feel like a choice at all. And alongside those endings, small openings, unexpected conversations, a door that didn't exist 6 months ago, a sense that something is reconfiguring around you, even when you can't name what it is. This is not your life falling apart. This is selective completion. When God is finishing a season of training, He doesn't just open the next door, He closes all the doors that would have distracted you from it. The third sign, and this one I want you to sit with, is a paradox. You feel simultaneously lighter and more urgent. The things that used to weigh on you, the old wounds, the old questions, the old comparisons, there's a strange lightening happening there. But the calling, that internal knowing of what you're here for, that is getting louder, not quieter, more insistent, not more distant. That is not pressure. That is the power beginning to arrive. It creates its own gravity before it fully lands. If you recognize yourself in any of those 3 signs, if even one of them resonates, you are not at the beginning of this journey. You are near the end of the training. And in the second part of this message, I'm going to tell you something I have been saving for last. I'm going to tell you exactly what the power is, what it does when it finally arrives, and what the only thing is that could still stand between you and receiving it. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. If you stayed, I'm glad you did, because what I'm about to share with you in this second part is the part most people never hear. It's easy to talk about the training. It's harder to talk about what the training produces, and it's hardest of all to talk about what happens the moment you finally step into it. So let's go there. I want to ask you something, and I want you to hold it honestly before you answer. When you imagine what the power is, the thing God has been preparing you for, what do you see? Most people, if they're honest, imagine something like a dramatic breakthrough. A moment where everything shifts at once, and suddenly circumstances line up, and doors swing open, and the thing you've been believing for simply arrives. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. Sometimes it does. But that is not the power I'm talking about. The power that God trains people for, the kind that requires the depth of preparation we've been describing, is not primarily about what happens to your circumstances. It is about what happens to every room you enter. Let me say that again, because I want you to really hear it. The power is presence. Not presence like charisma, not presence like confidence, although those things can come with it. Presence like something you carry that is not entirely yours. Something that arrives in a room before you do and stays after you leave. Something that makes people who don't even know you feel, in the moment you're there, that something real is happening. That something true is in the room. Esther had it. She walked into the throne room of a king who had the legal authority to end her life for approaching without an invitation. She didn't lead with an argument. She didn't lead with strategy. She led with presence. And the scripture says the king extended his scepter. The room changed because she was in it. That was not luck. That was not charm. That was a woman who had been stripped of everything that wasn't hers. Her family, her identity, her name, and what remained was something God had placed in her that couldn't be extinguished. Moses had it. After the burning bush, after the wilderness, after 40 years of having everything he thought made him powerful removed from him, when he came down from the mountain, his face was shining, and he didn't know it. He wasn't trying to shine. He wasn't performing. He had simply spent enough time in the presence of God that something had transferred. The presence was real, and it was visible, and it was not something he manufactured. This is what you are being prepared for. Not a role, not a title, not a platform, necessarily, though those things may come. A presence that carries something the world around you is starving for and doesn't know how to name. And now I want to be specific. Because presence is not one thing. It expresses itself differently through different people. And I want to name the 4 expressions I see most clearly, because I believe most of you will recognize yourself in one of them as I describe it. The first is what I'll call the seer's power. If this is yours, you already know it, even if you've never had language for it. You perceive things others miss. You walk into situations and sense what's happening underneath the surface before it becomes visible. You've always been able to feel when something is off, even when everyone around you says everything is fine. You have been called oversensitive. You have been dismissed, told you're reading too much into things. The training for this kind of power involves learning that what you sense is real, and also learning when to speak it and when to hold it. Because this power, used without discernment, makes people feel exposed before they're ready. That's why the training took this long. The second is the warrior's power. If this is yours, you've been tested specifically on your ability to hold ground. Situations designed to make you doubt, to make you fold, to make you agree with a narrative about yourself that wasn't true just to make the pressure stop. And you know the moments where you held anyway, even when it cost you. That's the power being forged. The warrior doesn't create conflict. But when real conflict arrives, when something important is under attack, there is a stillness in the warrior that does something to the atmosphere. It becomes harder for fear to sustain itself in the room. That is not aggression. That is a person who has been trained to carry peace under pressure. The third is the deliverer's power. The person assigned this carries something unusual, a specific anointing for creating movement where there was none, for finding a door in a wall that everyone else had accepted as solid, for taking a situation that seemed permanent and introducing a possibility that shifts the whole frame. Moses had this. Not because he was eloquent, he specifically said he wasn't, but because he carried an authority from God that made things that had been stuck for generations suddenly begin to move. If you've ever walked into a situation, said or done something that seemed small, and then watched things change in ways you couldn't quite take credit for, you may be carrying this. The fourth is the builder's power. This one is different from the others in that it is the most quiet and the most long range. The builder is not necessarily the one whose name is known. The builder creates things that outlast them, structures, communities, systems, ways of thinking that carry on long after the builder has moved on. What God requires of the builder in the training period is perhaps the most demanding of all. The willingness to build something without needing to see its completion. The willingness to invest deeply into something whose full fruit they may not witness in their own lifetime. If you've been called to this, the training has been asking you one question over and over in 1,000 different ways. Can you give without needing to receive in kind? One of these resonates, doesn't it? Maybe more than one. Maybe all four are speaking to something in you right now. And I want you to notice something about all four of them. Every single one requires the person carrying it to step out of invisibility, to stop shrinking, to stop managing how they're perceived by making themselves smaller than they are. This is why I said earlier that this power is dangerous, not because it harms, but because it demands full visibility. And for most chosen ones, after everything the training has involved, the rejection, the isolation, the seasons of being overlooked and dismissed, the idea of stepping into full visibility can feel more frightening than anything that was done to them in the wilderness. The internal voice says, after everything that happened when you were visible before, are you sure you want to do this again? That voice is real. I'm not going to tell you it isn't, but I want you to hear what it actually is. It is the last stage of the training. It is not a warning from God to stay back. It is the final exam. Will you step forward when stepping forward still feels dangerous? Because here is what changes when the power arrives, and I want to be honest with you about all three dimensions of it. The first thing that changes is the most interior. Something settles inside you. The need, the deep, sometimes desperate need for other people to confirm that you are who you think you are, begins to loosen. Not because you become indifferent to people, but because you begin to draw your knowing of yourself from a source that is not dependent on anyone else's response to you. This is what the Bible calls the settled self. The one who has been through enough to know the difference between who they are and what circumstances say about them. When the power arrives, it arrives in this settled place first. The second thing that changes is relational. And this one often surprises people because it doesn't always feel like a gift at first. The people and environments that are not aligned with where you're going begin to naturally reorganize. Some relationships shift in their depth, others end. And new connections begin arriving. People whose presence in your life you cannot fully explain, except to say that something larger seems to be arranging it. The right people begin to find you, and the timing of those arrivals is rarely random. The third thing that changes is circumstantial, not dramatically, not overnight, but with a consistency that becomes undeniable over time. Doors that were previously closed begin to respond differently. Opportunities begin to surface in areas you've been investing in. Provision not always in the form you expected, but provision begins to align with the direction you're finally moving in. This is not magic. This is the natural result of a life that is finally operating in alignment with its design. But I want to come back to the obstacle, because there is one thing that can still stand between you and all of this. And I want to name it clearly, because it would be a tragedy to get this far through the training and be stopped at the threshold by something you didn't recognize. The obstacle is self-rejection, not external opposition, not circumstances, not even the enemy. The thing most likely to prevent a chosen one from stepping into their power at the moment it's being offered is the quiet internal voice that says, I don't deserve this. Maybe I'm imagining this. Other people are more qualified. Who am I to carry something this significant? I want you to understand where that voice comes from. It is not discernment. It is the residue of the training. After seasons of being told you were too much, or not enough, or overlooked, or wrong, it makes complete sense that some part of you built a structure to manage the pain of that. A way of preemptively making yourself smaller so the rejection couldn't surprise you again. That structure served you, and it is now outdated. So here is what I want to invite you to do. Right now, wherever you are, I want you to place one hand over your chest, gently. without making a production of it. And I want you to think of the version of yourself that the training has been building, not the version that is still afraid, not the version still shaped by the wilderness, but the one that is emerging, the one who is capable of carrying what we've been describing. Let that version be real for a moment. Don't argue with it. Don't qualify it. Just let it be real. And if you're willing to say it even quietly, even just inside yourself, say this: I was trained for this. I am ready to receive what was always assigned to me. That's not arrogance. That's not presumption. That's an agreement with what God has already declared over you. Now, I want to close this message in a way that I don't take lightly. I want to pray over you, not a formal prayer, a real one. Something I mean every word of, for every person carrying this message right now. God, you see the one who is receiving this today. You know exactly where they are, what they've been carrying, how long they've been waiting, and what the waiting has cost them. You know the betrayals that shaped them. You know the isolations that refined them. You know the failures that built what nothing easier could have built. And you have seen, even when they could not see it themselves, that the training was not punishment, it was engineering. It was the most careful and precise preparation for a calling that could not have been entrusted to anyone less prepared. I speak over every chosen one hearing this today. The guilt of the waiting season is released. It was not failure, it was formation. I speak to the seers. Your sensitivity is not a wound to be managed. It is your assignment awakening. I speak to the warriors. The ground you have held even alone, even at cost, was not stubbornness. It was faithfulness to something true. I speak to the deliverers. The movement you were built to create is about to find its moment. Do not pull back. I speak to the builders. What you invest in now, what you give without guarantee of return, it matters more than you know. The fruit is coming. Stay. And to every chosen one who arrived at this message, not knowing what they were walking into, I speak this over you. The training was never meant to keep you from the power. It was the only way to make sure that when the power arrived, you would be the one holding it, and not the other way around. You are not still waiting. You are finishing. Go carry what you were built to carry.